Hi, I'm Femi OK. Thanks for watching the stream. There is a whole field of cellular and biotech research that is dedicated to either slowing or stopping aging. What would life be like if we didn't age? Is that even ethical? Well, we have a panel of experts, a panel of scientists who are going to be here to answer your questions and your concerns. You can put your comments right here in the comment section on YouTube.
I'm currently aging at 0.76. For every 365 days a year, I age 277. So I basically get like October, November, December for free. And then for the months I do age, then the progress is to reverse that aging that has happened so that I can be the same biological age. We all know how much money is in our bank account. We know how much we weigh. We know how many social media followers we have. But we don't know our speed of aging. Like, how fast are you aging in this moment? And if you had aging points, like your bank account, would you spend them a certain way? And so if we have aging points, we have an aging bank account, then society could shift. Instead of us saying we're going to be a martyr for wealth or status or whatever, would it change in that balance? And would it more be about humans? And we become obsessed about what we can become as a species, not what our technology can become.
That was Brian Johnson. He's 45 years old, but he really wants to achieve a biological body of 18 years old. Is it possible to stop aging or reverse aging? Joining us to discuss this, we have Ming Goa, a physician, scientist and director of the Aging Center at the University of California, Los Angeles. With us from Belgrade, Serbia, Peter Fedichev, founder and chief science officer at Jazeera. And joining us from Berlin, Andrew Steele, scientist, writer and author of Ageless, the new science of getting older without getting old. Is that possible? Andrew, are we chasing something that actually isn't possible? We're born, we live a certain amount of time, we're fortunate enough to live long enough, and then we die. How can you disrupt that?
I think the most important message I want people to come away with tonight is that this isn't science fiction, that it can sound like science fiction. And I think the best way to demonstrate that is, well, let's think about what aging is first. If you're a human being, your risk of death doubles about every 8 years. And this is because of the increase in risk of diseases like cancer and heart disease and stroke, the leading killers in the modern world. And so that means that me, at the age of 37, I've got around a 1 in 1,000 chance of dying this year. And I quite like those odds. But unfortunately, if you carry on doubling and doubling and doubling a number, it can eventually get very big very quickly. So if I'm lucky enough to live into my 90s, but unlucky enough that we haven't made any breakthroughs in aging biology in the intervening time, my risk of death in one of those years will be 1 in 6. And that's life and death at the roll of a dice. And so this statistical definition of aging, this doubling of mortality rate every 8 years, that's one way of understanding the aging process. But if we look around the animal kingdom, there are animals whose risk of death doesn't change no matter how old they are. There are animals like tortoises, certain kinds of fish, certain kinds of lizards like salamanders. These are capable of living, but they apparently don't get old. They can literally get older without getting old. And so I think there's no reason biologically, according to the laws of physics, why we couldn't apply the same to humans too.
Why do we age, Ming? There are certain questions that come up in this conversation that we don't usually ask ourselves. We just accept it. Why do we age? What is the scientific reason for humans aging, Ming?
Well, there are many reasons that...
Peter, I'll come right back to you. I'm going to let Ming go first and you go second. Thanks. Yes, Ming.
Yes. So there are multiple reasons that we would potentially would get aged. So one is biological reasons. So our machinery in our body no longer works so well because we pay attention to fertility. So from an evolutionary standpoint, we humans as a species, the most important activities of life to propagate. After certain propagation, there is no strong evolutionary drive to keep us well because historically we live roughly about 30s to 40s and then we pass because then the resources can be saved for the future generation. However, right now life has changed due to technology advancement. We have resources to support more people. So this is sort of a philosophical argument as well as biological argument.
Sure. So usually
I strongly believe that we could reverse aging because this is obviously reverse aging or extend life.
Yeah.
Is a long dream over several centuries, but in the past, we failed. But however, when I was a PhD student at University of California, San Francisco, one of my favorite professors, Cynthia Kanian, wanted to extend the lifespan, starting from a little worm known as C. elegans. So these worms live for 2 weeks. And then what she did is she asked if she could extend the lifespan of these worms when she introduced gene mutations. As you could imagine, I was skeptical at first. However, shockingly, she did it. She and other colleagues of the other scientific field found that they were able to double the worm's maximum lifespan. Interestingly, this extension is both for lifespan and health span. Not only do these worms live twice as long, the 2 weeks old worms, which would have been dead, now appear useful and robust, with robust movement. So, and then insults that would normally lead to brain degenerative disease no longer did so.
So then that worm would be the equivalent of 160 years old in human years, right? It would be a really old but healthy worm. Let me bring in Peter for one moment and I'll come back to you, guest. This is Peter on Twitter, and I want you to understand what his mission is. Come over here to Twitter. On a mission to significantly extend healthy human lifespan. That is really important. The word that jumped out to me was healthy human lifespan. Peter, what do you want to add?
Well, first of all, I would like to tell that human lifespan is increasing. Indeed, our lives are changing. Of course, maybe 1,000 years ago, people were expendable after 30 years old. But now it takes 30 to 40 years old just to socialize. We reach the pinnacles of our professions by 40 years old, when health is already starting to decrease. Which means that over the last 100 years, our lifespan almost doubled. It's not because humans decided to double our lifespan. It's because of technology and social changes. It takes longer for us to develop, to socialize, and that's why our genes are now combining in such a way that we delay our development and we extend our lifespan. So now we want to use technology to extend our lifespan even more. So if you ask me about aging, the important thing here is that in humans can be aged, but can be young and frail, or they can be old and frail. There is frailty and there is aging. So aging is kind of normal. So nobody, develops drugs against aging and things like that. But if you have diseases, you have medical interventions. So I think the tectonic shift that is occurring right now is that people start looking at aging prior the occurrence of the diseases. And what we want to do, everyone, is to stop aging before diseases start hitting us. The important thing is that, well, at least what we are publishing papers right now, we unfortunately see that human aging is mostly, in physics is called entropic, is mostly not reversible. It's very hard to reverse human aging, although it's easy to reverse aging in some smaller animals. The important thing is that you can stop aging, as some mammals have managed to stop it. I think evolutionary humans will stop aging in maybe a few million years of natural evolution. And as technologies, we now have to use all the available biotechnology in order to stop aging right now. Not reverse, but to stop it. Back to your question, essentially.
Let me just bring in a voice from our broader community. This is Aubrey de Grey, and he talks about what one of our biggest challenges right now as a human race is. This is what Aubrey told us earlier.
More than 100,000 people die of aging every day, and they do so after a long period of debilitation and decline. And now that is the number one problem across the world, even in the poorest countries of the world, because every country has an average lifespan of at least 50 now. So we absolutely must address it with urgency. And I'm delighted to say that we are making progress, but we need to make progress much more rapidly.
We're getting some really interesting questions, Andrew, on YouTube. I'm going to ask you to take on this one. One of our viewers says, a key part of a healthy life is being able to accept the eventuality of death. trying to tech our way into eternal youth or being immortal is a waste of time at best and a waste of us trying to maybe be a spiritual power rather than accepting that we're mere humans. That's Peters is like, no, Andrew, you're nodding. So I'm going to get both of you very quickly to have that conversation with some of our viewers. Andrew, you start. Peter, you go second.
Yeah, I think that this is a really common question I get, actually, and I can completely understand where people are coming from when they ask this. But the challenge is that when you're thinking about treating aging, most of us aren't super interested in immortality, although that's something journalists will often ask about. Actually, what we care about is this word that Ming mentioned earlier. It's health span. It's about the amount of your life that you can spend free from disease. So, cancer is a disease essentially caused by the aging process. Heart disease is essentially caused by aging. Stroke, Alzheimer's, dementia, all of these diseases, the leading killers, the leading causes of suffering, as Aubrey mentioned, in the modern world, are caused by this process, this biology that we call aging. And so we want to tackle the aging process to remove that suffering. And people will live longer because they're not getting on well as a result. And I don't actually necessarily think that's a bad thing. I think, death is a tragedy. There is, you'd never go to a funeral and say, oh my God, I'm glad they died. It really gave their life meaning. I think this is just a sort of story that we tell ourselves to try and justify the fact that, we do eventually grow old and die. And I think that as we do have to accept that as human beings, but we shouldn't accept the suffering that comes along with it. And that's what aging biologists really care about.
Peter, go ahead.
Well, just think about the world in which Soviet constructor Korolev could live another 10 years more, and the space race may ended up having another superpower on the moon. I think today we would be flying to Mars already, just 10 years, okay? I'm not talking about 1,000 life extension here. But think about the world where Steve Jobs could live another 10 years. I think what aging essentially, aging takes out the most successful professionals from us. And those guys have no chance to bring value to this world, which means that aging takes out lots of quality of life, happiness from the world. It's not really only the personal situation, it's also a huge economic thing. And also, guys, look, we don't die from cardiovascular diseases as much as we did. We are not dying from cancer as much as we used to have, as we used to do. But think about dementia. I mean, just think what happens if we don't stop aging. I mean, what would be the amount of human suffering around?
Let's talk.
There's this fantastic African proverb that whenever someone dies, a library burns. And I think that just really captures the fact that, all of this knowledge, this wisdom, this accumulated, life experience, all of the social connections, everything just up in smoke. And I think that really sort of crystallizes what Peter was saying about this human tragedy of aging and death.
Yeah, because of the oral tradition of some traditional societies, although hopefully you pass that on to the next generation, so your library lives on in a younger generation. Ming, let's be very specific here about what is being done right now that is relevant to us aging in terms of drug technologies and research. You already told us about the worm getting an extra, like doubling lifespan, but we're not worms. So what's going to help us right now?
Right. A great question. So what I was trying to say is to stop aging or extend lifespan is possible. This work was done 30 years ago. Since then, as my colleague have already told you about, there's a lot of work that has been done to extend healthy span in animals. There's no reason to believe that humans, we don't work that way, because in many other circumstances, we humans just use the same kind of tools and
Ming,
body.
but that is the theory, but what is the actual research that's being done? So we understand that there's certain animals that get older, but they don't age. A worm, you've managed to double its lifespan. But what about us right now, as an aging population around the world? What is there for us right now?
So there are certain...
Peter, let me have a little chat with Ming, and then I'll come back to you.
So, of course, there are several ways to answer these questions. There are potential medication interventions. There are also lifestyle interventions. So with a common goal to reduce the disease of aging, the burden of disease of aging, So which are heart disease, cancer, stroke, dementia, frailty, osteoporosis, and increased propensity for infection, and so on and so forth. Right now, the medications potentially that are not necessarily approved or anything, and then more work needs to be done. The intriguing possibilities are related to a medication known as metformin, which is anti-diabetic medication. By certain retrospective studies in the literature, it appears that it would potentially reduce the propensity to develop heart disease, cancer, and so on and so forth. Currently, there is a large prospective clinical trials that is being planned on to formally address if this medication can be really reversing aging. Other studies, including medication known as rapamycin, which has been shown to affect aging in animal models. So those are just.
Are we talking about mice, Ming? Are we talking about so mice can become young?
No. Yes. So none of these medications.
Yes, no. Mice can be younger.
Shown to be formally proven to delay aging in humans. Yet those are some interesting leads that the research community is following through.
All right. Peter, what do we have right now? What are you working on right now to extend a healthy human lifespan?
Well, I wanted to bring up this interesting experiment, which is called parabiosis, where it was proven that if you can connect circulation systems of young and elder mice, you could have a situation where the elder mice is getting younger, and unfortunately the younger mice is getting older. So there are clearly factors, circulating factors in blood of mice, at least, that could be associated with aging or possibly even control aging. We have been using very large data sets of human blood samples, and we identified a factor that, if removed from the circulation, actually extends lifespan in mice. And we did the discovery using the human data. We don't yet have a proof that this would work in humans as well, but at least you wouldn't have to engage with another human being to share the younger blood, at least. So we're looking for pharmacological solutions that can deliver a strong punch against aging, at least very late in life.
All right, Peter, as you were talking, Andrew was making a face. I don't know if it was a good face or a bad face. Articulate your face, Andrew. Go ahead.
It was a good face. I'm very excited by this stuff because we have literally dozens of ideas on the table. And the way that I often try and break these down is to think about something called the hallmarks of the aging process. And that's because biologists finally have some really strong ideas for the underpinning cellular, molecular, biological mechanisms that cause us to grow old. These changes in our biology that happen as we age underpin the whole gamut of age-related changes, not just the cancer or the heart disease or the stroke and the dementia, but also the wrinkles, the grey hair, the frailty, the incontinence. All of these different things that happen to us as we get older are fundamentally caused by some collection of biological changes. So to give a more concrete example, one of these hallmarks is accumulation of what are called senescent cells. Now, senescent is just a sort of technical term for old. And these are cells that have been stuck around in your body for a long time. And as a result, they've stopped dividing.
Yeah.
And when
Andrew,
a cell stops
I've got
dividing,
a fantastic animation. Can I show it? It's about senescence.
Yes.
All right. Hold tight, and then I'm going to you to pick up off the back of this video. This video came from a biotech organisation who are trying to work on drugs to stop senescence. And Andrew was just about to explain what senescence is. But let's let the animation do that. Let's have a look.
You may not feel it, but as your body ages, there can be an accumulation of malfunctioning cells called senescence, which is likely linked to many common age-related diseases. As these impaired cells appear, they begin to release large quantities of harmful proteins, causing inflammation, tissue breakdown, and eventual worsening of underlying conditions that accelerate tissue damage and disease.
So I'm really proud that I know what senescence is. Andrew, please continue.
Absolutely, yes. And that animation shows you what's going on inside all of our bodies all of the time. These senescent cells come into being. Now, you might think it's weird. Why are these cells in our body emitting this toxic cocktail of molecules, which we now think accelerates much or even maybe all of the aging process? The answer is they're calling to the immune system. They're saying, hey, over here, I'm a dysfunctional old cell. Can you come and clear me up? And in a young person, the immune system is very effective. It comes and clears up these senescent cells, and there's no problem. But as we get older, these cells accumulate more and more quickly. And also one of the other hallmarks of aging is a reduction in the efficiency of our immune systems. And we've all seen a really tremendously powerful example of this in the last few years when we saw how much older people were at much greater susceptibility from a disease like coronavirus. Sure. Because their immune systems are weaker, they're less able to fight that off, unfortunately. But the immune system is also a sort of a police force within our own bodies as well, clearing up these senescent cells. Now, this might be a very depressing story. Scientists have identified some cause of aging, but the good news is scientists have also identified something that we can do about it, which is that we can give these things called senolytic drugs. These are drugs that kill the senescent cells, but leave the rest of the cells of the body intact. And scientists have given these to mice initially, and what they found was they basically made these mice biologically younger. So they live a bit longer, which I guess is a good start if you're trying to slow down the aging process, but they're not stretching out the frailty at the end of life. These animals, they get less disease, they get less cardiovascular disease, they get less cancer, they get fewer cataracts. They're less frail, they're healthier. So if you stick them on a treadmill, then the little mice and these tiny mouse-sized treadmills they use in the experiment can run further and faster on this treadmill after they've taken the drugs.
Wow.
It appears to slow down cognitive aging. And frankly, it's worth doing a web search for some of these, some pictures of these animals, because you do not have to be an expert to see that the animals that have had the senescent cell treatment, they just look fantastic. They've got thicker fur, they've got less grey fur, they've got plumper skin. They just look like healthier, younger mice.
That's what we all want, fantastic-looking mice running around. All right, I want to bring in the voice of Charles Brenner, because we've been talking about how are we able to look at, I suppose, anti-aging, what is there out there? And Charles wanted to make this point. Let's bring him in, and then we can talk about it briefly.
Aging is a normal process required to convert a fertilized egg to a mature, reproductively capable adult. Aging is not a disease. You can age better with good nutrition, being mentally and physically active, and basically following mom's advice. You can age worse by overeating, drinking, smoking, taking non-prescribed drugs, being in violent situations. Unfortunately, there's an incentive structure in science that has rewarded hype in the anti-aging space. And it is not at all clear that one can directly target the aging process as a drug approach, despite what your viewers may have heard.
So is Charles contradicting everything we've been talking about, that drugs can't help us? I'm just going to get you to answer really briefly, because I've got some questions as well from our viewers. Ming, go ahead.
Yes, what Charles has been mentioning is a very good point, in the sense there are some pharmacological interventions, but most probably more importantly would be lifestyle interventions. Mm-hmm. So what he's stressing here is about certain diet, certain exercise activities, no toxins, including smokes, better sleep, a good amount of stress, but not bad stress, and social interactions, and so on and so forth.
Okay, Ming. All right, I'm going to move on because I've got some questions from our viewers and they're really keen to talk to you because you've really inspired some thoughts. This one is for you, Peter. And again, very quickly, on YouTube, how much will this cost? Is this kind of technology available only for the wealthy? Peter, instant reaction. Go ahead.
Well, it cannot cost a lot because you have too many customers, 10 billion customers. Think about that. Patents live for 20 years. 10 years is required to do your clinical trials. In 10 years plus, this will be a generic drug with no cost.
Okay. All right, this one, I love this question, Andrew. What are the possible psychological and emotional effects of living longer or indefinitely? Boredom, anxiety, depression. This one is going to Andrew. Andrew's going to answer in 30 seconds. Peter, hold tight. Andrew.
I think this is something that's dramatically overplayed, actually, because we think it's going to be this huge transformation of the human condition. But I just want you to think about how you conduct your everyday life. How many of your plans are predicated on the fact that you're going to die in 20 or 30 or 40 years in the future? People do obviously save for retirement. I've got a pension. But I think mostly we live our lives from day to day. And if we happen to be healthier for longer, our friends and our family were healthier for longer, this would be a fantastic thing. We could just carry on living our lives as we do now. And I really don't think this idea of getting bored holds much water.
All right, you've made me smile. Peter, we are out of time, but it's obvious from all of our conversation, there's so much more to talk about, much more research to take in. I really appreciate you. Ming, Peter, Andrew, and viewers on YouTube for your excellent questions. I'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.